Air Center.
Good evening. I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour this Thursday, the lead story. The world's leaders commit to working together to combat the global economic crisis. Margaret Warner reports from London. The other news of the day, including an uptick on the stock market. The big change in how banks and other financial institutions value assets. Another story about the recession hitting home. Tonight, the plight of the working poor. And back-to-back interviews with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Minority Leader John Boehner as the House moves toward a vote on the budget.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by
oil, energy, the environment. Where are the answers? This isn't a liberal or conservative issue. It's a human issue. As an energy company, Chevron has a great responsibility. So we've improved our own energy efficiency 27% since 1992. And now we ask you to join us in one of the most important efforts of our time. Using less. Will you join us? Chevron, human energy.
Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators. And by Grant Thornton.
The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, working to solve social and environmental problems at home and around the world.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Our lead story, the leaders of the group of 20 most powerful nations promised sweeping new aid today to needy countries and new controls on the world financial system. There was no move towards major new economic stimulus plans. Ray Suarez has our report.
It was mostly smiles in public, despite policy differences, as President Obama and other G20 leaders discussed a coordinated response to the global economic meltdown.
We are now going to go into a discussion of global financial institutions and global regulation.
And that discussion, hosted by British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, yielded broad agreement on a number of measures. New international regulation of hedge funds and credit rating agencies, oversight of tax havens to end the anonymity cloaking many international banking transactions, and a pledge of more than $1 trillion to help developing nations, plus $250 billion on international trade assistance. Afterward, Prime Minister Brown characterized the move as a first step.
Today, the largest countries of the world have agreed a global plan for recovery and reform.
French President Nicolas Sarkozy had threatened to bolt the summit unless it endorsed new regulations. He didn't get a new super agency, but welcomed the outcome anyway.
La crise financière a entraîné une crise économique.
It's the financial crisis that brought about an economic crisis. And this financial crisis was brought about by a lack of regulation. But clearly, today, a page has been turned.
However, there was no agreement on a coordinated fiscal stimulus. Germany and France steadfastly opposed any such move, while the U.S. and Britain, which have both passed large stimulus measures, urged worldwide action. But in the end, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said it was an almost historic compromise.
I think on the whole it is very important that we can go home from this conference and say we have done our bit to see to it that growth is restored, of prime importance to developing countries and emerging economies. We have done something for supervision and regulation, something that is qualitatively new.
Still, when he met reporters in the early evening, President Obama said, "I think we did okay, even with no action on stimulus."
By any measure, the London summit was historic. It was historic because of the size and the scope of the challenges that we face, and because of the timeliness and magnitude of our response.
After his first turn on the world stage, the president said he found it's important to forge partnerships and not try to dictate solutions.
Each country has its own quirks and own particular issues that a leader may decide is really, really important, something that is non-negotiable for them. And what we tried to do as much as possible was to accommodate those issues in a way that did not hamper the effectiveness of the overall document to address what I think are the core issues related to this crisis. Now, if it's just Roosevelt and Churchill sitting in a room with a brandy, that's an easier negotiation. But that's not the world we live in, and it shouldn't be the world that we live in. And so that's not a loss for America.
But Mr. Obama also said he could not ensure the steps taken in London would provide the needed global boost.
In life, there are no guarantees. In economics, there are no guarantees. The people who thought they could provide guarantees, many of them worked at AIG, and it didn't work out so well. So there are always risks involved. I have no doubt, though, that the steps that have been taken are critical to preventing us sliding into a depression.
On the sidelines, the president had one-on-one meetings with several leaders, including the president of South Korea. The two leaders promised a unified response to an impending North Korean missile test. And for a second day, there were protests throughout the British capital. None was permitted closer than a mile to the East London Docklands district where the summit was held. But overall, the protests were smaller than yesterday's raucous and occasionally violent demonstrations. Late today, I spoke with Margaret Warner from the Excel Center, the summit site in London.
Margaret, welcome. This afternoon, the president at his news conference called this a turning point in our economic recovery and praised the magnitude of response that his G20 partners came up with. Explain a little more about what's in that package of measures announced this afternoon.
There's three major elements. One is the commitment to continue all these different countries with their stimulus packages, continue enacting them and do whatever it takes. Two is, of course, in the regulatory area, which we can talk more about in a minute. And the third and big new element was really all this new money for the IMF and other international financial institutions. And it totals, I mean, you have about, it was $250 billion that the IMF had in loan authority. That's been tripled to $750. They're adding another $250 for what they call special drawing rights, which is to help beef up the capital of a lot of the member countries of the G20. And then, finally, there's another quarter of a $1 trillion in special trade credits to help both imports and exports from the developing world. So the Obama administration sees this. It's not direct spending as stimulus is, but that will have a stimulative effect. And as he said, this is not charity. These growing economies or these developing economies are really the future drivers. There are markets and are future drivers of world economic growth.
Great Britain and the United States came to the conference looking for more stimulus. France and Germany came to the conference looking for more worldwide financial regulation. Does everybody leave London having gotten at least a bit of what they came for?
I think a bit is the word. As one White House official said, nobody got 100% of what they wanted. In other words, the U.S. and U.K. had already accepted they weren't going to get commitments for new stimulus, new spending for stimulus. But the French and the Germans did get not a global regulator, which they wanted, but they did get new standards for reforming the banking system for everything from hedge funds to executive compensation, which will be enforced by national regulators. And finally, they got something they really wanted, which was a sort of expose of tax havens. That is a blacklist that's going to be published, or may have been today, of countries that don't share tax information.
This was President Obama's first appearance on the world stage. Can he leave London with a set of accomplishments to talk about?
Well, you could see, I think he certainly thinks so. He was modest and said, leave it to others to judge. But they are certainly pleased with the fact that they got a global response to this crisis. And President Obama did clearly play a role here in bringing people who were already at the table to an agreement. And I'll tell one anecdote. The big sticking point, the logjam all day, was over this tax havens issue. France and Germany, particularly France, really wanted this, and they wanted this OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development in Europe, to publish this list. Blacklist for the countries that don't share, a white list for those that do, and a gray list for countries like Switzerland, which have said they will, but they haven't yet. President Hu of China was absolutely and ultimately opposed because Macau, a city in China, is one of these, and but China's not a member of the OECD. President Obama, we're told, finally, late in the afternoon, first gesture to President Sarkozy, they went in a corner. President Obama showed him some suggested language to split the difference. Sarkozy agreed. He then went back and he wrote it out, or someone wrote it out and took it to President Hu, who then, he and the Chinese were considering it, so finally President Obama gestured President Hu into the corner. They discussed it, and President Hu, it took more time, he also agreed. President Obama then brought Sarkozy to the corner, and they all agreed. Now, that was the kind of, I think, leadership that he did exercise. It was not, as they would say, it was not dictating an answer, but it was coming up with an answer in which the two parties each could meet.
During his news conference, the president sounded like he was trying to walk a fine line between a strict responsibility to his constituents, as he called them, the American people, and also an understanding that the United States is going to play a big role in pulling the world out of a ditch.
Ray, I think he was trying to say that they are one and the same. In other words, the question was from a Chinese reporter who said, how are you going to keep local politics, or all politics is local, from interfering with the execution of any of this by any of these leaders? And he said, well, of course, I'm the president of the U.S., and in the end, I'll be judged by my voters as to whether I made their lives better. But then he went on to say, I have to make the case that their futures and their well-being are tied up with the well-being of people in your country. And, went on to explain this interdependent, interconnected world, that a company like Caterpillar, for example, is losing jobs because they can't sell abroad. So I think when he said this, I think he was also speaking to all of his fellow leaders as well, that they all are going to have to make this case and fight protectionist sentiment at home.
Did an Obama vision for what a recovered world economy looks like and how it's different from the past emerge from his discussions with the world press?
Yes, and I think from his discussions with other world leaders. Gordon Brown, British Prime Minister Gordon Brown, said today at his press conference, the Washington consensus is over. And by that he said there's a new consensus. And by that he meant the old Washington consensus of just completely liberalizing trade and encouraging all these developing countries to throw up all their subsidies and to adopt the, quote, Washington model. And what's interesting is President Obama also had problems with the old Washington consensus. As he said today, I really believe in free markets, but I also think it sometimes goes off the rails if you just he didn't say unfettered greed, but that was the implication, take over. And he said, we need some rules of the road. And so I think that's what they're moving towards, is a recovery that is global, that, as Gordon Brown said, is a more equitable and thereby more sustainable one. And that is not really terribly at odds, I don't think at all at odds, with President Obama himself personally believes.
Our Margaret Warner joining us from the just wrapped G20 summit in London. Margaret, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ray.
In other news today, Wall Street kept its 4-week rally going on hopes that the G20 summit will boost the world economy. Another factor was an accounting rule change that could shore up balance sheets at banks. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 216 points to close at 79.78. The NASDAQ rose 51 points to close at 1602. The House voted today to give the government authority for the first time to regulate tobacco products. The Food and Drug Administration would be permitted to make ingredients public. ban flavoring, and block marketing campaigns for cigarettes and the like. The Senate takes up the bill later this month. Former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich was formally indicted late today on federal corruption charges. The main charge involved plotting to sell a U.S. Senate seat, the one that President Obama resigned. Blagojevich's brother and 2 former aides were also indicted. The state legislature removed Blagojevich from office in January. In southern Afghanistan, fierce fighting has killed 20 insurgents. The U.S.-led coalition announced the battle erupted yesterday in Helmand province when militants attacked a patrol. 31 militants died in clashes in the same region on Tuesday. Israeli police questioned the country's new foreign minister for more than 7 hours today. Avigdor Lieberman was interrogated on allegations of taking bribes, laundering money, and other misdeeds in his business dealings. He denied any wrongdoing. Lieberman has already drawn fire as foreign minister for saying he opposes any concessions to Arabs to gain peace. And still to come on the NewsHour tonight, reassessing the worth of assets. Working hard, but still poor. House Speaker Pelosi, House Minority Leader Boehner. First, the big change for banks and the possible impact on the financial crisis. Jeffrey Brown has the story.
Accounting rules are not normally the stuff of front-page headlines or credited with boosting the stock market. That's what happened today as some otherwise obscure rules were changed. The rules in question are known as mark-to-market or fair value. Put simply, a bank's balance sheet is composed of a wide variety of assets, many of which are loans and securities. Under mark-to-market rules, a financial institution must value those loans and securities at the estimated prices they could fetch on the market currently. But these days, with markets essentially frozen, setting a real-world price for an asset is that much harder. And a debate has grown over whether mark-to-market accounting undervalues assets and unreasonably hurts the balance sheets of financial institutions. We get some help on understanding all of this from Floyd Norris, Chief Financial Correspondent for the New York Times, and Simon Johnson, Professor at the MIT Sloan School of Management and a Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Floyd Norris, first tell us a bit more about mark-to-market accounting, what it is and what it's intended to do.
Mark-to-market accounting has been around for a long time, but a couple of years ago they tweaked the rule to specify that they really had to pay attention to markets. That greatly offended the banks when the prices began to fall, and they had to take big write-offs. They think that the asset prices now are far lower than they will turn out to be worth when we eventually get out of this economic slump. On the other hand, they've not been willing to buy the assets at anything like the prices they think they're worth. They went to Congress. They put a lot of pressure on Congress. Congress threatened the Financial Accounting Standards Board, which sets the accounting rules, basically with putting them out of business. And the FASB basically gave in. Today they adopted a rule that pretty much does what the banks want, but they did throw in a sop to angry investors who felt it was going to hurt them to have the banks no longer reveal market values, and they're requiring more disclosures.
All right, I want to come.
That will help, we don't know.
All right, I want to come back to some of these issues, but Simon, back up again a little bit for us, Simon Johnson. The whole idea here, the intention, is to come up with the truest sense of the value of an asset?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the balance sheets are for. That's what investors are looking for. And it's interesting, even the proponents of these changes are claiming there's more information or more accurate information after the rules have been changed. Obviously, that's very controversial. But the point is to show you what is a bank really worth. And that's what you need to know if you're a shareholder or if you're somebody who wants to lend to that bank.
So it makes sense. So if a bank holds an asset, the question is, how much is that asset worth? And the issue is it worth what they could get selling it today or when? At a later time when the market presumably comes up? Is that what this is about?
That's right. Now, banks are allowed to hold some of their assets to maturity, and those they don't have to change as the market value changes. But other parts, they may be trading, or they may be holding them and thinking about potentially trading them, and the price on those should reflect the market value. The question is, what's the market value? And the banks, as Floyd said, have been challenging the legitimacy of the market, or saying there is no market for mortgage-backed securities in particular. And of course, it's the mortgages that got us into this trouble. People are saying the market's dried up, there's no meaningful prices. We can't use mark-to-market in the way that it was intended.
All right, but for those people not in the financial world, it's still a little bewildering. These things that we call toxic assets, are they any less toxic because of a change in accounting rules?
No, not at all. And that's why the stock market reaction is kind of interesting. There are various stories about why the stock market would like this, but it's also a little bit puzzling. As Floyd said, there's going to be more disclosure. Maybe it'll all be kind of information neutral in the end. We'll know what's been changed and why. But it's a little bit like adding some more reducing transparency or reducing the clarity in a market and for a set of securities that were already pretty opaque.
Well, Floyd Norris, you refer to the FASB. Now, that's the Financial Accounting Standards Board. First of all, who are they, and where was the pressure coming from that you were referring to make the changes? You talked about banks, and I think you referred to political pressure.
Yeah, it's a group of 5 people who were appointed, and they sit in Connecticut, and their job is to write the accounting rules for the United States. They're all expert accountants. They all know accounting intricacies far better than most accountants. And they tend to work on what is proper accounting, what makes sense to an accountant. The politicians often don't like the results. In the 1990s, Congress got upset because the Accounting Standards Board wanted to force companies to report the value of the stock options they were giving to executives as an expense. The companies fought it, and once again, the FASB backed down, though it did force a little more disclosure, and it took basically another decade for that accounting rule change to come after the companies that were fighting it had lost a lot of battles and a lot of prestige. This time, the banks, especially the smaller banks, went to their Congress people and said, the reason we can't lend is because they say we don't have enough capital. But we would have enough capital if they just would let us value these assets at what we think they're really worth. And that got a really good reception in Congress. A few weeks ago, there was a hearing of a subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee where every member there was denouncing Bob Herz, who's chairman of the Accounting Standards Board, and demanding he change the rules. And Herz, before that hearing, had been talking like he wouldn't make very many changes. And a couple of days after that hearing, they announced plans for these rules, which were substantial changes.
Now, Simon, we referred to the stock market going up. Stock market liked this.
The stock market loved it. Admittedly, this was a good day for other reasons, and so there was a certain positive spirit around the G20. But people think this is good for banks, and this is good for the economy more broadly. It's not clear why the reaction was so strong, and it's not clear if it's going to last.
What's possible reason?
Excuse me,
Go ahead.
I'm not sure this had a whole lot to do with the stock market today. The big rally started in Asia long before the Accounting Standards Board met. And the fact they were going to pass this today has been known for at least a few days. A few more details came out today, but the market was soaring before those details came out. These are two things that happened on the same day. I'm not sure they have much more relation than that.
Okay, we'll take the stock market off the table, Simon. Another thing that was talked about here was the possible impact on the government's plan to deal with bad assets. How do you see it playing, pro or con there?
Well, it seems very unlikely to help the government. Remember, the idea of the government is to try and force banks to sell some of these toxic assets and encourage hedge funds and other investors to buy them at a higher price than they would otherwise. And the government lending, these so-called famous non-recourse loans, cheap loans, are going to help close that gap. Well, after today, I think the banks are going to feel less pressure to sell, and they may also be able to ignore prices that they see in these auctions when it comes to marking what's on their balance sheet. So in general, it's not going to help what I think Secretary Geithner is trying to do with his plan.
Well, Lloyd Norris, how do you see the pros and cons, the impact on the government plan?
Well, it could have a different effect. I'd like to hope it will, but I'm far from sure it will. And that is that if the Geithner plan works, if we get a real market in these assets, then under this new rule, as well as the old one, the banks will have to say this is a real market and market those values, and this rule will become somewhat irrelevant. It would, if the prices went up enough, the banks would get the values that they claim they're worth, and, you know, we basically have everyone happy, I think, at least for a little while. Whether it could make, it very well may make the plan harder to pull off, but if the plan is pulled off, that could negate the importance of this.
All right, why don't we leave it there? Floyd Norris and Simon Johnson, thanks for helping us understand this.
Thank you.
Next, another story about people hard hit by hard times. Tonight, working but getting paid less. NewsHour correspondent Spencer Michaels reports.
The recession hit 37-year-old Heather Sharp much harder than she ever expected. The single mother of 5-year-old Christina thought she had it made. When she was 20, she dropped out of community college to take an entry-level job in the booming mortgage industry.
I started out doing receptionist work and then eventually worked my way up and ended up doing doc drawing, which is the papers you sign when you get home, and into underwriting, and just kept going and going.
Sharp lives in a house her parents own in the town where she was born, Antioch, California. It's on the northeastern edge of the San Francisco Bay Area, along the picturesque Carquinez Strait and the Delta. It's a town that grew like wildfire in the past decade because the homes were more affordable than those closer to San Francisco. Today, many of those homes are vacant, foreclosed on, and downtown Antioch is a depressing scene. Vacant storefront after vacant storefront line the empty streets. As a worker in the mortgage business, Sharp had a front row seat at the housing fiasco many blame for the county's and the nation's woes.
We were giving loans to people who didn't even have to prove their income. You know, appraisers were coming out appraising houses hundreds of thousands higher than they realistically were worth.
Did you know that this was probably an unsafe practice at the time?
No, because we were busy. I mean, we were really, really busy. I could make on a good year 70,000, 60-some thousand. I was safe there, I thought, for a while. So it didn't turn out that way. I'm sure everything is locked.
Before her daughter turned 4, Sharp's company started laying off workers.
All of a sudden, one day they walked in, said, come on down here, gave us our blue packet, and we got about 2 months severance pay, and that was it.
Sharp is hardly alone. The social service offices of Contra Costa County, where Antioch is located, are bursting with people who have lost their jobs, run out of unemployment insurance, and are asking for help. Corrine Morgan is the division manager for the county's workforce services.
We've been seeing our caseloads, our applicants go up 36% in the last year. These are people who, a lot of them had jobs. A lot of them are two-parent families. They now have been laid off, particularly from mortgage industries and banking industries. They've had unemployment. They've gone through their assets, and they come to us for help.
If you play outside today, you have to wear your beanie, okay?
For Heather Sharp, the fear that comes with losing a job and not finding a new one was very real.
I started getting scared, and pretty soon, you know, I'm realizing, okay, this is kind of taking too long. I'm not getting any responses on anything I'm sending out over the internet for jobs.
Meanwhile, she was caring for Christina and worried about keeping life as normal as possible.
I started getting really depressed. Just, you know, and my daughter was noticing it. You know, I felt bad because she was like, Mom, why are you sad? And, you know, why aren't you working? And I felt bad because all of a sudden I went from making so much money to living on unemployment.
Her mother told her about a nearby nonprofit called Opportunity Junction, which trains mostly women for the workforce. Sharp decided to give it a shot. Alyssa Friedman, the program's executive director, says Opportunity Junction was originally founded to help people move from welfare to work. But recently, she's seen a real change in the clientele.
We're now seeing people coming through our doors who have really solid work histories, but who lost their jobs and can't find another right now. We're seeing people applying to our program who were homeowners, who were solidly in the middle class, and who have fallen out of the middle class. Okay, all right. Okay.
Using the skills she learned at Opportunity Junction, Scharf did find a temporary job in the payroll department at John Muir Hospital, about an hour's drive from her home.
Some of these other ladies here. Okay.
She says she earns $1,800 a month, less than half of what she had been making in the mortgage industry. And since the job is through a temporary employment agency, she's unsure how long she'll be working. Meanwhile, $800 of her monthly pay must cover the cost of sending daughter Christina to a school where she can stay late.
Grandma's picking you up today. Because I work late. It's my late Monday. I'll be home at dark again.
All of the stress and the uncertainty has been exacting a toll on Scharf.
I went to Kaiser and they gave me antidepressants and sleeping pills, just a mild sleeping pill because I couldn't sleep at all. So
how were you paying your health care?
I was paying it out of pocket.
That must have been expensive.
Yeah, until recently, so now I don't have any.
Really? You let it go?
I had no choice. It's that or lose my vehicle. I'm on the last week of my pills, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure out something.
Her daughter's health insurance is paid for by her father. But for Scharf, the chores of daily living, the simple act of shopping at the supermarket, have become exercises in lowered expectations, in cutting down, in searching for bargains.
Well, wait till it's on sale next week. You got enough.
Scharf has become one of the working poor, a plight that is more and more common, says Alyssa Friedman.
These are folks who are working hard. They're working 40 hours a week. Maybe they're working a second job on top of that, and they're still not making enough to survive, to be self-sufficient. Here in the Antioch area, 36% of working families are not earning enough to meet all of their basic needs.
County workers are seeing direct evidence of that as well. Corrine Morgan started as a social worker in the 70s.
How does this crisis compare with what you've seen over the last 30 years or so?
This is by far the worst. And it's hard on the department. We've had to lay off staff at the same time that we have a greater need coming into our office.
Heather Scharf figures she can ride out the storm, but she knows it won't be easy or quick.
Some days are not optimistic. Some days are like, I can't do this. This is just, I can't do it. But, after maybe having a bad night or a bad day, I wake up and I say, there's something out there for me. It might not be instantly. And I've been humbled, very humbled.
At a time when people like Heather Scharf need help the most, the social safety net is eroding. Plunging home prices and lower wages have hurt tax revenues, so county and state budgets have taken big hits, cutting health and social service programs that the working poor increasingly depend on.
And to our interviews with the Democratic and Republican leaders in the House of Representatives. Today, Speaker Pelosi presided over the final hours of House debate on President Obama's budget proposal. As members of Congress moved toward a vote a few hours ago, I sat down with the Speaker in her office. Speaker Pelosi, thank you very much for talking with us today.
My pleasure.
The House is poised to pass President Obama's $3.5 trillion budget. How many Republican votes will you get, and are all your Democrats on board?
Well, we'll have a good, strong vote today for the president's budget. I'm not anticipating any Republican votes, but that is par for the course. Usually a budget is a party line vote, and we'll have a good, strong vote. It's a great budget. It's really transformational. It represents a change, a switch, a new direction.
Do you worry about those huge, dire deficit projections that have come out of the Congressional Budget Office saying this is what's going to happen if this budget passes? $9
trillion in years to come? Well, I have confidence in the budget that we have. This is a 5-year budget, as budgets usually are, and in the 5-year period, we will reduce the deficit by at least 1/2 by the year 2013, as a matter of fact. I always worry about deficits, and that's why what we have in the budget are investments to turn our economy around, investments in health care to bring down costs and reduce the cost. Health care reform is entitlement reform, bring the deficit down. So all of our initiatives are investments to grow the economy and decrease the deficit.
Now, separately, the House Republican leaders have now come forward with their own budget. They're saying trillions less in spending, and they are instituting tax cuts. What's your assessment of that?
Well, their budget is one that I think is noted for 3 things. One, it gives bigger tax cuts to the wealthiest people in America. It repeals the Recovery Act and the investments in the future, and it assaults Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It is, by and large, a hollow shell when it comes time to make investments to take us into the future. This is a real contrast. I've said over and over again that, quoting Thomas Jefferson, that every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. And I try to be guided by that. But some are. And this difference of opinion on this budget is a difference of opinion, of principle in terms of opportunity, fairness, security, and responsibility.
Now, there's a procedural shortcut that the president would like to see go through. You, Democratic leadership, are now including in the budget to allow you later this year, in essence, to bundle all into one single bill all the different parts of health care reform, and then prevent the Republicans from using the filibuster to slow it down or make changes. It's called reconciliation. Do you expect to use this when the time comes?
It's a last resort. I would hope that we'll be able to build bipartisan support for health care reform that produces a healthier America with accessibility, quality, etc. But if need be, at the end of the day, we must have health care reform. We would hope to do it. It's really an issue more for the United States Senate with the 60 votes that are required without reconciliation, or to go the reconciliation route, which the Republicans did over and over again for the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest. President Reagan even used reconciliation.
And speaking of that, if I'm not mistaken, back when the Democrats were in the minority in the House, you and others argued against this reconciliation procedure. So I guess my question is, now that the shoe's on the other foot, do you have any reservations about potentially using something that would disarm the opposition on such an important issue?
The rules became what they are. And so we're saying, let's play by the rules. And that is that reconciliation is one of the options that the Republicans insisted on using then, and that now are a way. I mean, the overriding equity to be weighed is, how do we get quality health care for all Americans? Health care as a right, not a privilege. All of this is processed. It's inside Washington talk. What does it mean to the American people? By one process or another, we are going to get them what they want, and that is quality health care that is affordable and accessible to them. A healthier America, not just health care, but prevention and good health.
Now, President Obama has said repeatedly he wants, if possible, to reach across the aisle, to work with the Republican Party. He talks about bipartisanship. Would this square with that if reconciliation were used?
Well, I think that reconciliation, as I said, is something that you use if you cannot achieve your goals through the regular order. But it is an accepted practice in the United States Senate. We have put it into our legislation on health care. I would like to have had it on there on some other issues, but as just to show some sign of cooperation, we just put it in for health care and education, 2 issues that should not be controversial. And I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to reach bipartisan consensus on.
Do you think you'll get Republican support for other major legislation this year?
Well, I certainly hope so. Whether you're talking about health care reform, the president has already called everyone to the White House, inside the Congress, outside the Congress, grassroots activists, health care providers, the full spectrum of people who have a stake in how we go forward including consumers of health care, representatives of the American people. And the Republicans who were there spoke in good faith about how they would want to work together. So I think that I'm hopeful that that is possible.
Question of overload. The president's not only working on the budget, of course, and on financial and the economic recovery, he's also talking about significant health care reform, education initiatives, energy initiatives, all of it this year. But you're hearing veterans of the Clinton administration, the Carter administration saying it's better to just focus on the economy, that he runs a risk of overloading the circuits. Could you be in a situation where you end up with less because you're trying to do too much?
Well, I must have missed who these people were, but I can say to you as Speaker of the House that we are not going to turn the economy around unless we invest in education, health care, and the energy piece that are in the budget. That is why they are there. So it's not a question of either or. You can't have the economic turnaround unless you make the investments.
Let me ask you about the auto industry. General Motors, it now appears more likely that the Obama administration will push for some sort of surgical bankruptcy. If that happened, would you support it?
Yes. Yes, I think that the president is giving another chance to Detroit, and I think that should be viewed as good news there. He has been clear about what his standard is. This is what we had hoped would have happened the end of last year, that in the fall of last year under President Bush. He took a little bit of a different course. The president is saying, okay, here's what we need. We need a viable industry. And we're giving a lifeline, but not life support, to keep an industry alive unless it has a viable business plan. And one of the tactics to do that may have to be, again, as a last resort, to have some kind of structured approach to it. I hope it wouldn't be bankruptcy, but if that's what it needs to be, then I support the president on that.
The White House did force out GM CEO Rick Wagner. Should they also force out the CEOs at Citigroup, Bank of America, and the other banks?
Here we are in a very discrete situation where these businesses, General Motors, Chrysler, Ford, were really coming as supplicants to the Congress to keep them alive. Ford evidently is surviving without another infusion right now, and that's a good thing. The survival of General Motors is, again, very important to our industrial manufacturing base, to our economy. It has systemic implications. And I think the president was very right in what he did there. All of these are a case-by-case basis, and it's up to the boards of directors of these companies to make a judgment about how their leadership is performing. But I would not be averse to the government being more aggressive to the extent that we have the leverage. But, you know, in our free market system, we want to proceed cautiously in that respect, but definitely if it is necessary.
Politics. President Obama continues to have a high approval rating, almost 60% in most polls, while most polls also show that you and the Democrats in the House have almost that high disapproval. Does that put you on separate tracks in terms of what you can get done?
Well, our approval rating going up to like 40 is a very big deal. That's giant progress for us. Congress has never been a popular institution, but in the last 3 months, since we've come in and had the results that we have had, our ratings have gone up much higher than they were before, and we hope to improve upon that. But we have to do our job. Congress is not a personalized institution. It's an institution that people know through their own representatives, who they generally give high marks to, but like to mock as an institution. I'm so glad that the president's numbers are what they are. He's a great president. He is a great president, a visionary, strategic thinker, great intellect, an eloquent spokesperson. Did I say a strategic thinker? On how to get the job done. So we want his numbers to soar, and we're not in a popularity contest with each other or anybody else.
And speaking of his presidency, you obviously knew him, you supported him before he was elected. What have you learned about him in the 2.5 months that he's been in office?
Well, I supported him since he became the nominee of the party. a realization of what we suspected, that this was a very strong leader, values-based, intellectually driven, loves America, tied to the American people, and she's very strong. And I love it. You know, I love working with a very strong person. She's young, boundless energy, as we can see, and really a person who makes us all proud as Americans, and couldn't be prouder than to see how he is representing us overseas.
Well, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, we thank you for talking with us.
My pleasure, always, Judy. Thank you.
And now, from the Speaker, we turn to the top Republican in the House of Representatives, Minority Leader John Boehner. Kwame Holman spoke to him this afternoon.
Leader Boehner, thank you for joining us. Leader Boehner, you and other Republicans on both sides of the Capitol have looked at this budget that the Democrats are moving today in the House that is a reflection of what President Obama has called for and railed against it. What's wrong with what they're proposing?
I don't know where I should begin. The first problem is it spends too much. When you look at the level of spending in this budget, it will make President Bush look like a piker. And I and other Republicans felt like we spent too much during the Bush years. But this budget, at some $3.6 trillion for next year, will be the largest expansion of our government in our history. Secondly, it taxes too much. There are some $2 trillion worth of taxes in this proposal that will tax every American. Not only do we have higher taxes for capital gains in the top rate and bringing the death tax back in full force, but we have this national energy tax. They like to call it cap and trade. But what it does is that it taxes energy. And so if you drive a car, turn on a light switch, or you have byproducts that use a lot of energy, everybody's going to pay this tax. But it's not just the tax that's so onerous. It's the millions of American jobs that I believe will be at risk because our competitors around the world don't have such a policy. And so you'll see products coming in from China and India and elsewhere that'll make our products made here more expensive relative to theirs. And so you've got higher spending, you've got higher taxes, and then you get to the real whammy, and that's the national debt. President Obama's budget will double the national debt in the next 5 years. He will triple the national debt in the next 10 years, given their projections. This is unacceptable. I think it will imprison our kids and grandkids. It will slow our economy. It will slow job growth in America. It's just not, in my opinion, not the way to proceed.
The Speaker Pelosi says your budget being offered by the Republicans in the House gives too many tax cuts to the wealthiest Americans and does not do those kinds of investments in renewable energy, in education, and health care.
But I think we have a responsible budget. It does curb spending. It does curb taxes to allow more investment in our economy. We're in the middle of a serious recession. The best way to help solve that recession is to allow American families and small businesses to keep more of what they earn. And most importantly, we have much smaller deficits as we go forward. And so I believe that we have a responsible approach to our budget, and far more responsible than the budget plan that they're bringing up.
Speaker Pelosi says in order to get the economy growing again, you need to invest in healthcare reform. It takes money to do that. You need to make investments in energy and in education, which makes the populace more productive.
Well, there's certainly some investments that could be made in our society, but this budget that they're bringing up avoids all of the tough choices. All the tough choices get stuck on the backs of our kids and grandkids. And when you keep spending money, you don't have to make tough choices.
There may be a tough choice Republicans will have to face in that it could come to pass that the healthcare investment could pass the Senate with only 51 votes through a process called reconciliation. It's a process that both parties have used from time to time. Why do you oppose it now?
But never been used to institute great big national policy. While it is a tool that's available to the majority, it's a tool that's been used with some discretion in the past. and I would hope that that would continue.
Is it all right just to have it as what the Speaker calls a last resort, using that 51-vote threshold reconciliation, while the Speaker says she continues to seek bipartisanship with your party?
All I can do is chuckle. There's been no bipartisanship. I've reached out. We've offered better solutions in many cases, but there's been no effort on the part of the administration or Speaker Pelosi to work in a bipartisan manner. We continue to see these policies rolling out of committee and brought to the floor with little or no debate. This is not the way to run the United States House of Representatives. And unfortunately, they've taken a go-it-alone strategy, which I don't think is healthy for the country.
Turning to the auto bailout, you come from Ohio, a state with auto production. You criticized the way the Obama administration handled Rick Wagoner, apparently moving him out. It's also been said that the auto industry has been treated more harshly than the Wall Street banking companies. How do you assess the way the Obama administration has dealt with both?
I don't think the federal government has any right to suggest who the CEO of any company ought to be. But in this case, not only is it the CEO, now they're going to decide, the administration is going to decide who the board of directors should be. This goes against everything that I believe in. But at the end of the day, it's the stakeholders, whether it's the employees, the shareholders, the bondholders, the suppliers. They're the ones that have to come to an agreement on how they can preserve the future for GM. And I'm hopeful that they will.
In all of these interventions, have the taxpayers in the financial bailouts, the money loaned to the auto industry, have the taxpayers been put on the hook for too much money? Does that concern you deeply at this point?
Well, there's certainly bailout fatigue here in Congress and bailout fatigue in the country. How much money can we afford to invest? How much risk can we take with our kids' future by spending this money today? But somebody ought to be developing the exit strategy because we can't continue this effort of pumping trillions of dollars of taxpayer funds into these institutions.
Finally, Mr. Leader, Mr. Obama has been in office for a couple of months, doing a lot, working with the G20 right now. How do you assess the work he has done? That people have said he's put too much on his plate, missed focus on the economy.
I like the president. We've got a good, open, and honest relationship. He has put more on the plate than any president in the history of our country. And I have profound disagreements over his budget and his direction that he wants to take our country. This huge expansion of the federal government in the midst of a crisis is, in my view, everything I came to Washington to fight against. And my job as the Republican leader here is to fight those proposals with everything that I have on behalf of the American people. And when we disagree, is to make sure that we offer what we would think would be a better solution. We need to have this fight, if you will, and let the American people decide who's going in the right direction.
House Republican Leader John Boehner, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, the major developments of the day, G20 leaders promise new aid to needy countries and new controls on the world financial system at their summit in London. They did not agree on any new economic stimulus. Wall Street rallied again. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added another 216 points. Former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich was formally indicted on federal corruption charges. He's accused of trying to sell the Senate seat vacated by President Obama, plus other crimes. And the U.S. House voted to let the government regulate tobacco products for the first time. And a reminder, you can find us online at our new one-stop address, newshour.pbs.org. Tonight, you can find more on the London summit, including the text of the final agreement, plus the audio from President Obama's news conference, a Paul Solman explainer of mark-to-market rules, and local station reports on how communities across America are coping in hard times. And remember, the NewsHour is available whenever you want it at newshour.pbs.org. We'll see you online and again here tomorrow evening with Mark Shields and David Brooks, among others. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thank you and good night.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer is provided by Chevron, Intel, supporting math and science education for tomorrow's innovators, and by Grant Thornton.
And the National Science Foundation, supporting education and research across all fields of science and engineering.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Oregon Art Beat introduces a self-taught artist whose medium is colored pencil. Tonight at 8. At 8:30, Oregon Field Guide takes a rare look at active undersea volcanoes. From Portland to Port Orford, it's your member support that keeps our communities connected. Thanks, members.
Musical instruments, all well below retail. Our experienced, knowledgeable staff will provide peace of mind in your shopping experience. Silver Lining Jewelry and Loan.
Time has run out. That's right, folks. The giant quitting business sale at Home Collections in Salem is over. It's the final day. The sale doors close forever in a few days. All reasonable offers will be accepted. All remaining stock will be sold at up to 76% off. Open today. Yes, today till 8 p.m. It's your last chance to buy name brand furniture at the price you want to pay. Everything goes up to 76% off at Home Collections Furniture in Salem. Don't dare miss it.
High-speed internet, ecstatic, happy, high-tech, automatic, fiber optic, flabbergasted, suddenly it's crazy faster, friend edition, hip-hop, hipster, OMG, your profile picture, upload, download, films, games, music, pug dog pictures, power boosted, fastest flying, screaming, yelling, ROTF, LOLing, speeding forward, future hopping, always dreaming, never stopping, COMCAST.
Help give babies a healthy start. Hi, I'm Deborah Knapp here with Katie, Vivian, and Levi, who are here today through help from the March of Dimes. Hi! One day, all babies will be born healthy, but we need to walk to get there. Come and march for babies, Saturday, April 25th, here at the Rose Quarter Commons. When you walk, you give hope to families with babies born too soon or sick. Head to KATU.com for more information. Join us and help K2 and March of Dimes march for babies.
Accurate and reliable weather forecast. K2 Storm Tracker Weather.